It's time to be woke. Take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the fact.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. I'd like to apologize for the late start today. We've had some technical issues that we had to iron out, unfortunately. It's one of those days where if it's going to go wrong, it will. And hopefully that will be the trifecta of things that are detrimental to us over with, and we can continue with our show for you today. I hope everyone is well. Thank you for tuning in. We've got a big show for you today. We have a couple of different things we're going to talk about. Of course, we're going to continue with the third of three parts on our talk about leadership, specifically servant leadership in the progressive movement, and wrap that up today. And we also have, we're going to talk about something that happened over the last 24 to 48 hours. The kind of, if you're in the macroeconomic zone and you're a advocate for MMT or modern monetary theory, as I am, then you were kind of broadsided by something that happened, and this is a good thing, but it certainly needs some discussion, and we're going to get to that today as well. So, but that doesn't start until I introduce my lovely and talented and very patient co-host, Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Hey, good morning, and I want to be clear that the delay was mine. So there's a lot going on in my life right now, and I'm learning new things every day. Every day.
Yes, as long as we grow, we're growing daily.
That's exactly right. So real quick, I want to say good morning and welcome to all of our new family members at Fred Hampton Leftist. We are so glad that you're here to join us. What we do here is critical thinking and do a little bit of a deep dive on the headlines that you see. We do take requests. So if you have a topic that you're a little curious about, you saw a headline on MSN or something that you want to know about, drop us a line. We'll do the deep dive, the research, provide you with all the links and cite our sources. That's what we do. So real quick before we get started, I want to go ahead and my dog's barking. Hey, Finn.
Well, clearly Finn is excited about this too, right?
He is.
And how can you not be? How can you not be, Karen?
Right, exactly. So what's going on is, for those of you who are just tuning in and don't know my backstory, I am now in the middle of the desert, and my neighbors have horses, and the dogs, think they're giant dogs, so they're trying to go play with them. So,
and unbeknownst, contrary to the song, those horses do have names. So I would say that the first story that we're going to get into today, and this is part of a broader picture that we've talked about, and in terms of an event that the other platform that I volunteer at with Real Progressives, when we had a book club, the start of the book club was last night, and the book that we are reviewing is The Case for a Job Guarantee by one of my most favorite people in the world, Professor Pavlina Cherneva, and guests that we had to answer questions after the reading that we did were Professor William Black of the University of Minnesota and Professor Fadl Kaboub, our good friend from Denison University. And the reason I bring this up is that one of Professor Kaboob's favorite expressions is, they ignore you, they laugh at you, they fight you, and then you win, right? And it was his critique that we are currently in between the they fight you and you win part of that statement. And if you're an advocate for MMT and understand about how governments and federal governments of a sovereign nation finance themselves, that's a very good sign. And it's a long time coming for this group. And it's actually it means that the austerity model that has gripped the United States since FDR is no longer the norm and is starting to be debunked on a broad scale, right? And so it's very good thing. And the event that happened that started this all off, Carrie, shall I bring up the first graphic?
Yeah, let's do it, because I saw Stephanie Kelton's tweet, and she had she is so funny on her Twitter feed, but she was like, let him do it. It was Chairman John Yarmouth, and I posted a link in the chat so that you can go out and take a look. This was from the House Budget Committee, and this was on C-SPAN. MMT was on C-SPAN, and I love the way that he phrased this, because this is the bridge between the MMT community and our conservative neighbors. The way that he phrased this, and he was talking about the forced austerity. This goes back to Reagan and Clinton and all of these administrations. So for decades, where they always said, we can't afford it, we've got to eat our peas, we've got to, all of these statements that they made, that somehow the federal deficit is just like your household budget, and it's not. And that has been the greatest lie that has caused so much misery and death in this country. And oh, by the way, we export that to the rest of the world. For someone at this level to say it and for it to appear on C-SPAN, I was like, oh, it's Christmas. This is even bigger than just Christmas morning. And the way that Stephanie was like, I'm going fishing. I just loved it. Loved it.
Yeah. This was a pow moment for MFT. And the reason why it was so surprising is because it was from such an unlikely source, because, to be honest, really, this came off the radar from someone who has never really even spoken this way. Like, I mean, we're talking about a congressman from the deep blue state of Kentucky. This is a huge thing for our movement, and there's no denying it. You can't now. There is a representative of the United States government on C-SPAN explaining to you how MMT works, right? This is not something that anybody can deny anymore. And if they do, you can look them in the face and you could say, you're lying. That's why this is so huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am totally here for it. And I'm so glad that that a number of people, for the first time, particularly those who watch C-SPAN, not just policy wonks like me, but the people above me in age. I don't want to call them old, because I think I'm kind of old at this point, but they're starting to see it now. And these are the people who were young and had families under Reagan, and they totally bought into, well, of course, if you have somebody in a position of authority and leadership, it instills some trust. So they're not going to lie to you. Why would they lie to you? Why would they get up on TV and lie to you, and then have everyone from Tom Brokaw all the way down the line reiterate that point? Of course, you're going to believe it. You're going to see it in TV and newspapers, and your neighbors are going to talk about it. Of course, the world is flat, and that's what you go with.
And that's a huge point, Carrie, because when you think in terms of what the government is saying to you, it is so much easier and more content in your own mind for you to think or believe that the government has your back, that they're in your corner, and that they're telling you the truth and they're looking out for you, just for your own mental well-being, that people default to those ways of thinking because it just makes them feel better, right? And this is the Matrix moment, right? This is the Neo waking up and throwing up and moment that a lot of Americans need to understand how we move forward, right? That all of the progressive policies that we advocate for, that Americans need to survive, that are now that narrative of the austerity model where they say, how are we going to pay for it? We don't have the money. America's broke, right? And this isn't just a Republican thing, right? This is both sides of the political bird, the left wing and the right wing of the same bird, that have been narrating this austerity model since forever, since most people that are listening to us have been alive, right? This is a huge deal. Obama, right? It's the credit card. A credit card from China that our children and grandchildren are going to have to pay back. That's all a lie, and it's now being shown to us in real time. This is huge.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I love it. And then, of course, if you're just tuning in and you're not familiar with how our show works, we're live and interactive, so we definitely want you to join this conversation. And I just want to call out David Jones. You are off the chart this morning. You are on fire. He's weighing in, and he says, first, I hope you got your coffee. Second, austerity is violence. Absolutely. It is absolutely violence. And he said, when you have your own sovereign currency, you can deficit spend however you like, limited only by, Andy?
Race horses.
No.
Natural
No.
race horses? Oh, sorry. Resources. I'm sorry.
Resources, right. If you have the resources available, yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's what why certain places will have what we call hyperinflation, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to give, in layman's terms, if you're going to give people in your society more money to spend, you better make sure that the goods and services in that society there are enough of them to absorb that extra spending, right? Exactly. That's what that means.
Yep. So shout out to everybody on the budget committee. Thank you. Praise God, or spaghetti monster, or whoever it is, or whatever. Just today is a day of celebration. And real quick, reality winner is out of jail. She's a whistleblower who lover, hater, whatever. This is another one of those people that we went after. So she is now out of jail, and so thankful and grateful for that. Today is a good day for all the things that we have to worry and still push for. But let's just take a moment and kudos to the things and people who are doing right. We've got to celebrate those victories. So I just want to mention that too. So, all right. So if you are just tuning in and you've missed parts 1 and part 2, we put that on our website where you can go back and look at it. And I just want to reiterate that this entire concept of servant leadership, in my opinion, is what is sorely missing and most vital for the progress of the progressive movement. We don't teach these skills, and these are absolutely learned skills. So there are some links on that page where you can go and do a deep dive. And if there's enough interest, we're happy to take this offline, like the book club, and do a deep dive on an 8 or 12-week course with homework and workbooks and all of this sort of thing for anyone who's interested in it, because it's not just for organizational leadership, not just for corporations. This is an individual thing too. And I was talking to Lisa the other day, and we were discussing servant leadership, and she said you get it in the military too, and you may not recognize it while you're serving as servant leadership, but they teach those same principles because it works. It works, and particularly in a military setting where you are literally risking someone's life, and everyone must rely on the person next to them. Servant leadership is absolutely vital. So you do have a little bit of that authoritarian command because you gotta have a hierarchy in situations of life or death. But when it comes to a platoon and your specific group, this is where servant leadership is just phenomenal, and it translates through everything that you do, from whether you're a parent, a volunteer, you're someone who's organizing in a grassroots level, to working in a corporation, becoming a manager, CEO, whatever else. So it's a phenomenal way of doing things and a method that we forgot. And it's one of those where, I used to laugh when I would do marketing consulting, and I would be brought in, and the CEO would be like, well, I read a book once on marketing, so I'm going to tell you how to do your job. No. And the same thing goes for organizing, on the ground field work and becoming a manager. Just because you're good at your job doesn't necessarily make you a good manager. So I want to push people to go and take a look at it. There are a lot of really great books out there, particularly those that are built on the foundation of Robert Greenleaf. And this is where I got my certification and did all the coaching work that I did. So I posted that link, and before we get out of here, I'll post it again in case you missed it. So all of that's there, plus part 1 and part 2, where we were talking about some practical examples and a situation that we got into. So if you did watch part 1 and part 2, we posed the question in that, particularly for Andy and I, we were kind of caught in this moral dilemma about doing our jobs and not omitting the truth while still, trying to take the high road and be patient, listening to people who said that they were acting in good faith, and then after certain events and a period of time, realizing that that's not necessarily the case. So we posed the question, and I'm open to it. What should we have done? And if you were watching it, and don't blow smoke. I mean, don't say, oh, you guys did absolutely everything perfect, because nobody does. So this is your exercise in critical thinking, looking at the situation that we presented, what our argument was, what would you have done, and what should we have done, and what mistakes do you think we made, what could we have done better? So I'm going to put that out to the chat, and think about it. We're obviously open to it. So Paul, good morning. Paul says, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., we need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice, not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity. I love that, Paul. Thank you so much. And then Blackjack says, the economy is stock flow consistent with a better understanding of finance and accounting. This heterodoxy would be orthodoxy. The oligarchy that owns the US will fight to prevent this outcome. You know what, Jack, they were never going to hand it to us, ever. So part of the fight means educating others so that I can take my red MAGA neighbor and my blue MAGA neighbor, and I can explain it to them one-on-one, because I am more likely to change their view just by having a conversation as part of the community, and get them to plant that seed, reiterate that seed, be friendly, be nice, and this is how we're going to change it, as well as direct action. So thank you for that comment. And that, Lisa is correcting me. She says, I don't know if this was the military. Everything would have been documented, refer back to as things transpired. Yeah, okay, so that's the other part of the big piece of servant leadership is transparency, honesty, moral compass, and having everything documented. And yeah, it's actually based on the same thing. So thank you for that, Lisa. So, okay. So, Andy, you want to do a high road overview of what happened this week?
Well, sure. And This is basically a response to what happened after our show on Wednesday. And if you don't know, I'm not going to give an overview, but this is Wednesday morning at 10. Our middle show of the week. If you want to know, please go to our Facebook, Twitter, wherever, and rewatch it. It does a better explanation than I could give it right now. But regardless of that, Carrie and I, there are two reasons that we ended up doing that show. And the first reason was that we wanted to explain our complicity with what had transpired, because as Carrie said, that we felt that there was a moral dilemma and that we needed to explain ourselves in order to, and as I have said over and over again, and we've talked about that, is that we insist on taking the high road at all times, right? The other part of that was that we wanted to use this as, in a more broader sense, of the shows that we did this week, right, about leadership and about servant leadership, and use it as a teaching tool, right, in a place that we can say, look, what could we have done different in this situation? And can we all come to an agreement and move forward from that in a place that, tells people, okay, this maybe was done incorrectly, without, throwing the rocks of accusations and stuff like that, but at least coming to a moral understanding of what we're talking about ultimately. And we received word that KRTT Media had issued a release that, among other things, claimed that we were lying, and to them and to their audience, that we were sharing confidential information that they had not agreed to allow us to share. Now, we would push back on that because, in their own words and descriptions, that this information was quote unquote all over social media. But I gave you the two reasons why we decided to move forward with this. And unfortunately, the guys at KRTD did not agree. So they decided to sever all ties with us. That was their decision. It happened. Personally, I'm not going to harbor any ill feelings about it. I wish them the best in all their future endeavors, and we move on. And that's how I feel about it. Carrie?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And I think, as a journalist, it's one of those things where you never want to be part of the story. You never want to be the focus of the story.
Absolutely.
It's your job to tell it. And then particularly in an advocacy space, when we had Joe Sheree, and we were helping her tell her story, and I was doing some investigative work to either corroborate or refute the things that she was saying. And that's our role. Our role is to do a deep dive and help somebody explain it, or maybe correct something they say, so that we are getting the unbiased, unfiltered truth out there. So in that situation, I was like, damn it, I don't want to be in the middle of this. And yet there was this situation that is I think arguably had some questionable moral implications in it. So I thought that it was good in a practical example. So like I brought up, and I misspoke during one of those episodes, I think it was part 1, when I talked about Southwest Airlines, and I named a musician as the CEO, and I forget, Fred Halpert or something.
Yes, and he didn't even know he got promoted.
Right. So but those were examples, from my youth that don't exactly apply to what we're talking about today. So this is why we wanted to bring it in terms of actual events that are happening right now, and then also clear the air on where, for weeks I have felt horrible about this because I I in journalism they call it catch and kill. When your editor uh, will not let you publish a story, I did it to myself uh, because we were asked to wait, and I couldn't stand it. And so this is why we did the story. And we will take the consequences as it is, and we'll just move forward. But it's you cannot have a foundation on morality and integrity as we try to do here while having that in your background. So it just get it off your shoulders. Let's talk about it, get out there, and then we can move forward. So that was the purpose of it. So today we want to talk about accountability because I think everyone has the experience where somebody will, they've been caught in a situation where they made a mistake, judgment error or something like that. It's not on the level of homicide. It's just you did something pretty shitty, and we all do that. We all do that. So how do you get yourself out of it? And whether you're an individual or an organization, there is a very simple formula that leads to accountability. So when we talk about accountability, that's taking ownership of not just a mistake, but your objectives, your goals, your things, all the things that are deliverable under your purview. As a manager, if you have employees that have deadlines, due dates, or whatever, all of that you own, not necessarily employees, because as we talked about in part one of servant leadership, your job as a leader is to remove barriers for the people that report up to you and that you protect them. So what does that accountability look like? And the formula itself is pretty simple. And I'm going to tell you, having worked with some really high profile public relations organizations who have defended either celebrities or corporations or whatever in a situation that just is a little unsavory, how do you write the statements? How do you get them out of it and get them back into good graces with the public or in their organization? Formula is very simple. Here's what it is in a nutshell, boiled down, high level. I screwed up, and then the next part is how I screwed up, and you could even go a little light on that part. So here's what happened, here's why it happened, and here's why it will never happen again. Those three pieces are the entire formula to the public relations profession. So when you think about the last time you saw a celebrity or a sports figure who was doing a press conference and they were ready to talk about all these allegations that they were facing, that formula was in play. They had a PR firm who was coaching them through it. And the PR firm would sit down and say, okay, just like your attorney, tell me everything. I need you to be absolutely honest with me because I need to know all the facets of whatever this issue or transgression is. And let's really talk about it so I know what to expect, what kind of questions. And then they go into crafting the understanding that whether it's real or it's just a PR exercise, here's what happened. I screwed up. So you remember the famous one was Pat Roberts crying on TV, "Dear Lord, forgive me," and he got caught in an affair and embezzlement and everything else. He was crying on TV. So the first thing he did was, I screwed up, and he was asking for forgiveness, talking about how he screwed up. And then in that next phase, he said, here's why it happened. I believe he said something like, I was not faithful enough, or I wasn't humble enough, whatever. And then the last part was, please forgive me. Here's why it'll never happen again. So it's the exact same formula over and over and over. And I'll read the comments. Oh, hello from South Wales. Good evening to you. But part of this is, it's really hard as adults. Like, to me, we don't have a rite of passage necessarily in Western culture, but this is it. Once you learn to lean in and embrace this particular formula of accepting responsibility, we call it falling on your sword, right? Accepting responsibility, talking about what happened and here's why it will never happen again, it, it gets so much easier. And the only thing I can think of, and I'm going to put this out to everybody watching, my theory on this, the reason why it's so difficult for people is it's fear. It's based on fear that I am having to admit that I am somehow imperfect, that I am less than what I choose to believe of myself, or I have gone to great efforts to have you believe about me, that somehow that's not true, and I'm afraid. Or in a situation where there's a monetary risk, or your job might be at risk, or the organization that you support has done something maybe a little untoward, then it becomes in your mind a greater risk. So I'm going to put that out. Why do people have such a hard time with the accountability thing? So Andy, do you have any theories on this?
Well, I think that in my opinion, I think that a lot of people default to the damage control scenario, right? Like, and we see this especially in politics, and the whole paradigm of it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, and the protection of people, and the neoliberal regime that we see with the mainstream media that control that narrative. And I think people take a notice of that, and I think that they learn from that, right? That they say it's okay to do damage control instead of own your mistakes and move forward and learn from it, right? That the integrity of doing that, you maintain your integrity when you do that, right? And we've heard the expression that it's easier to tell the truth than it is to lie, because you don't have to remember the truth because it's the truth, right? And people want to save face. They don't want to admit that they've done something wrong, instead of it being a learning moment, like we've talked about, in how you admit that you screwed up. You admit that you're a human being, because we all screw up, right? And we all move forward together and learning from those mistakes. And unfortunately, it's more important for people to look like they didn't make that mistake than it is to actually learn from it. And that's a really big part of this, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think over and over again, the part that people miss on the accountability is they're so afraid of the backlash that comes from it. They do all of that damage control, when in reality, when you step up and take accountability and show that ethical backbone, you actually get more favorable responses and more support. So Renee, thank you so much. She said, I so much respect that you took responsibility for your part in the situation. Addressing harm requires accountability, and too many organizations don't do that. And she's right. And I think that's where we started in all of what we do here, because not only do we want to maintain integrity in a fact-based situation, but we actually invite our audience. If I'm wrong, if one of the links that we post you disagree with, or you want to challenge something we say, we invite that here, because we know we're not perfect. We're absolutely not perfect. And as a journalist, if I have to write a retraction, it's not that I failed. What I'm leaning into is the accuracy piece. Because new information comes out all the time. So I think that's something to be mindful of. And Andy, you touched on it. If you're organizing or you want people to follow, particularly in the progressive movement, that's how you get more people to trust you and to follow.
Well, and that's how you build bridges too, right? Like, I mean, and this is a narrative that comes out of pretty much anybody that has a platform of this nature, right? That it's the division, that it's the one side against another that is the most harmful thing in our societies now, right? The tribalism. And I know that that's an overused word and people get sick of it, but it's absolutely true that I'm on one side. I only listen to narratives that are friendly to that side, and anything anybody on the other side says is incorrect or wrong. Well, there is a bridge that needs to happen, a huge bridge between those two sides before any of our countries or societies move on as groups in a more just society and a more fair society. That doesn't happen when we continue to, put up the proverbial wall in between us and just, talk badly about the other side and continue that narrative over and over, right? One of the examples that I wanted to use in terms of leadership and how we do the right thing and we understand and we take responsibility for our actions is most people in what in a parent child relationship, right? If you're a parent with your partner or a single parent with children, right? How do you represent your family and in terms of what you're responsible for? Well, I would say that the majority of parents would say that, well, of course, I'm responsible for my children and their actions, right? We all know that if you've been a parent that has had a child that goes up through the teenage years, clearly, there's always, that can be one of the hardest relationships that you'll have as your child goes through the teen period, right? As they start to, put their own moral compass together, right? And that can be very painful. But I don't think a parent ever stops being responsible for their family, for their kids, right? And if you look at as an example, that needs to be the example for how we determine how all of our relationships work, right? The boss employee narrative, the even within your friendships, right? That you take responsibility for your actions, and that's counter to the quote unquote looking out for number one narrative that we hear in mainstream media and everything that we listen to, that it's okay to be greedy, that it's okay to care about just your situation, right? On a greater good, we can't move forward as a society without these relationships in place and people taking responsibility for their own stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you brought up the parent-child relationship. And then I want to get to some of the comments because there are a lot of economic comments coming through, and I love it. Absolutely. But the parent-child thing, we taught my son Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and there was a particular passage in it because it really touches on leadership quite a bit, obviously under the war frame, but there was a phrase, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a hero but once. And what that means is if you are flailing about in that damage control, you are constantly looking over your shoulder. It prompts you to do some really kind of sleazy things like, scour the private social media channels of your people and make sure that you are controlling the message and doing things that are probably not okay. Probably, if you sat back and really thought about it, you would go, yeah, that was kind of shitty of me. And that is the 1,000 deaths that you are dying because you cannot or will not lean into the leadership role of accountability. And so we taught him several times, and we taught him this. You got to follow the sword. If you screwed up, especially going into a parent-teacher meeting, we tried to put the fear of God into him. I'm like, if you don't tell me everything, if I get a surprise when I walk in there, it's going to be me and you having a conversation. So this was having him go through, what exactly did I do? Where was I wrong? What could I have done better? And then going into, here's where it's never going to happen again. So yeah, as parents, we teach it, not really notice it, but the chat is just popping. So good morning, Jim. Jim's watching on Facebook. He said that's a huge deterrent to admit your mistakes. Absolutely. He lost sound on his end, but we'll try to get back to you on that one. Paul Smith, MMT, the future, whether you like it or not, but most people will love it and understand why we need it. Absolutely agree with that. And then Wesley Wow says, I dig it. I'm a volunteer with RP. Oh, hey, RP, small community.
How you doing, Wes?
Yeah, he says, so already an advocate for MMT and its implications that change orthodox thoughts, even on the left. And I absolutely love that. And then there was one question or one comment from Colin from Wales. This was interesting. And Andy, I think you've actually hinted at this before, but Colin says, I saw someone the other day say that during the pandemic, the parts of the economy that the ruling class care about has not been affected. Property and ownership have kept their value, he says. And that kind of goes into, you remember we did that show on cognitive dissonance and we had the billionaire real estate guy using all of that water during the drought in California, and they're like,
yes,
oh, I'll just pay the fine. I'll just pay the fine. And his yard was big enough for like 400 families comfortably. So,
and not a weed in it.
not a one. So yeah, all of these things go into it. And that cognitive dissonance piece is also about accountability, right? Because if you're at a certain level economically, you no longer really have to care about these things that affect other people. The rules don't apply to you. And we actually cited a couple of studies in that episode that show clearly that they believe the rules don't apply to them. It's only for other people.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot. And I've seen this on a number of occasions. I've actually commented a number of times that you have people in our space, right, in the activism space, or that have dedicated a life to serving or volunteering or what have you. And that life has eventually turned into something that has, quote unquote, paid off for them, right? That has put them into a level above where they were before, into a place where they no longer have the financial constraints and they're now above where they used to be in terms of, financially and class and whatever, right? And a lot of times you see with these people, they don't change their outlook and how they want to help people, but they certainly don't want to do anything that now jeopardizes their climb into where they are, right? And I've seen that a number of times with people that came from poor backgrounds that have, suffered and they've worked their butts off to get to where they are. But now I'm going to change my narrative that makes sure that it's going to be slightly different because I'm still going to help, but I don't want to lose what I have now, right? And I think that's a trap that a lot of people fall into, right? You're empathic or you're not empathic, right? You want the world to change. You want the world to become a better place. But once you get into that place, okay, well, maybe it's not so bad. I used to be a communist, but now that I've got a nice house and some cars, okay, maybe I'm a capitalist, right? And I think that that's a trap that people fall into, and you can't lose that moral compass that held true your entire life, because ultimately it means that we have to continue to make sure that people have boats that can all rise at the same time, right? I'm not going to keep myself separate from you if I get into that better place. Instead, I'm going to reach down, grab my hand. I'm going to pull you up to me because we all need to be here, or none of this works out.
Oh, absolutely. And I keep going back to the phrase that I absolutely love, all of us or none. And we get into the crabs in the barrel kind of thing where, as you said, I get comfortable. So I'm fine. Okay. So Jay reminded us, and we got to start doing this, Andy. If you are watching this program, particularly on the YouTube channel for Hampton Leftist, who has just been off the chain awesome to us, we thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe, because if we don't say that, Jackie's coming after us and we need you to do it. Jackie scares me.
And we love Jackie, but she could kill us both.
Absolutely. So please like, share, and subscribe. This is so necessary. Lorna, thank you so much. Lorna says this conversation is so necessary at this time. I admire your courage and your actions, and I learned a long time ago that living life with integrity matters. Girl, I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. And I do want to have more of these conversations, not just about servant leadership, but about how we relate to each other, because unity, love, all of that. And that's how we move forward, right? So I am a consummate warrior, but even I recognize that if we don't take care of each other and build these bridges, I'm going to be out there fighting by myself. And that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, and that army of one doesn't have much of a chance.
No, not at all, not at all. And I keep going back to Game of Thrones, that horrific scene with Jon Snow. I don't want to be Jon Snow out there like an idiot.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they aren't going to give you dragons, right?
No, I don't. I would love a dragon. My big wish now is donkeys. I'm going after donkeys. I'm getting donkeys. So Wesley says we have Richard Wolf out here regurgitating. Ooh, Wesley, look at you. He says we have Richard Wolf out here regurgitating neoliberal talking points about inflation, and we are already seeing commodity prices plummet. Yeah, absolutely. Like wood prices are coming down now because the demand was a little bit high and the supply was low. Now all of these producers are catching up. He says Marxists using neoclassical, not MMT, are useless. Oh, Wesley's on a roll this morning. And then Jay is complimenting you, Andy. He says brilliantly said. He says we love you all anyways. Thank you, Jay. We're going to get our shit together. Me in particular, Andy already has got his together, so it's just me. And then he reiterates, empathy is what will put us in a better place internationally. Absolutely. So, by the way, this is something that I haven't been able to cover. Gaza is getting bombed right now. So, for those of you who were not following the situation or maybe didn't see it, there was a ceasefire in place for all of 6 days. Now it's started up again under a brand new administration, same as the old. So yeah, this is part of that all of us or none. We got to take care of life and family and all of these things, no matter where it is, right? And then let's see, Colin. He says, I'm Welsh. I have dragon. Colin has dragons. Share the wealth. And then he says the Jacobin left is brought into the neoliberal hysteria about inflation and have no clue. Well, Wesley, this is why we do what we do. This is why real progressives does what they do. They're the deep dive on the MMT and the macro. And then Andy, quick plug for Macro and Cheese.
Yes, absolutely. This week we are introducing a very well, certainly new to us, a new concept called degrowth, and it's a kind of a deep dive with a gentleman that's written a white paper on the subject and how this conversation needs to happen if we are talking about moving forward, saving our ability to live on this planet, and including how the GDP doesn't need to continue to go up and up and up, because it pretty much means our demise. And so this gentleman is named Lorenz Kaiser. He is at school in Switzerland, and he's a master's student of environmental systems and policy, and very eloquent gentleman, and has some amazing concepts. So if you have a chance, we're as always, it's being released on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern, and it's a really good one to hear. So there's my plug for Macro and Cheese.
Absolutely. So also, if you did not see the lineup coming up on Fred Hampton Leftist, it's out on the Twitter feed. Go check it out, because there is a huge lineup of programs coming. We're just like the front runners first thing in the morning, get your coffee together. There's so many different conversations and programs going on the Fred Hampton Network that it blew my mind reading it this morning. So make sure you check that out. And then some upcoming things. We've got Rome heading to Washington State Seattle on his tour for the poor. So if you aren't familiar with what's going on there, check out Rome's Twitter feed. He is actually touring the country. He's trying to make it to every different state. And the way that he framed it in the interview with us was, look, people need to know that they're loved and cared about. And if it just takes somebody like me to get out in front of these people who are homeless, have housing insecurity, food insecurity, all of these sort of things, just to bring them something that they need in that day, say, hey, you matter. He said, that's what I'm doing. So it's a beautiful concept. So make sure you help and support him on that. And then one other thing that's coming up, and Savage Joy, shout out to her. She's a badass. Her and I share a disability. So every time I see her going out, like she took a photo of herself on the train heading to another part of the country, and she's going to advocate for Medicare for All, this big national march that's happening, not just in DC, but everywhere across the country. And this is coming up at the end of July. I believe it's July. So I'll try to get the links together so you can see there's cities all over the country where this is happening in collaboration with the big one happening in DC. And I will personally be in Albuquerque covering the one that's happening here and doing live interviews, streams, all of that sort of thing, making sure that I bring that to you. If little Albuquerque in little New Mexico can do this, you can get your butt up and do it. You can go and find your city. It's happening in all major cities. And then they also give you the tools to bring it to your city. If there isn't one close to you or your city's not doing it, they give you the organizing tools to do this. So it's a phenomenal event. And this is how we make change happen. If you thought it was going to start in Congress, no, it has never started in Congress. It starts with us on the ground, our neighbors, and this is what we so need. July 24th.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is the event that people were, that you should say you were waiting for, right? Because the popular critique on our side is that we don't know how to organize and we don't have any leadership. Well, here it is, 24th of July. It's going to be massive. There's cities being added every day. I think the last total I heard was something in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 major U.S. cities are having these marches. If this is something you believe in and you want to have your voice heard, make plans to get out to this, because this is the event that we always critique that we don't have, and it's here, right? This is a very big one. This includes real progressives as well, and Real Progress in Action, and includes us here at Hair at the Dog, and Joy, and the Yellow Vests of Eric Kestner, friend of ours as well. All of these groups are involved, and this is going to be a major event, and you can say you were part of it, and adding your voice to the chorus that says, we're done with this. We need this.
Absolutely. Yeah, after everything we just went through in the pandemic, and Jay says they're organizing in Orlando. Hoots, yes.
We have Jen Perlman in Miami, right?
Yeah.
You have Jason Call with Whole Washington in Washington State. We have all of these big name people that on our side of the fence that are all throwing their weight entirely behind this as a coordinated group to get people out. This is such a big event, and you don't want to miss this, because you can say you were here when we made a difference.
Right, exactly. So I think one point that I want to get out is, if you are at all if you need talking points and things like this, the website for this July event does have some of them, but I'm happy to go through all of this before we get to the event, because number one, like many of you, I came from a very strict conservative family, and then when I would go, it's a different language, it's a different mindset, different language. But when I would go into these very, very red districts, I mean, Trump country, Tea Party country, and I would do these talks on Medicare for All, I never had one person walk away saying, no, that's bullshit socialism. Because when you get to the heart of what Medicare for All is, it's simply regulation. That's all it is. It is a regulatory program that cuts out the waste and abuse of insurance companies. We still have private hospitals, private doctors. We just remove those death panels and return the autonomy back to our doctors, because a doctor will tell you right now they're doing statistical medicine, and it's based on the bean counter charts of mortality and morbidity, not on what they learned in school. And they want to do the real doctoring and have a conversation with you and really get it right, but they can't. So this is something that I'm happy to help prepare you for it as we go through. It'll be awesome. So yeah, it seems really good. So okay, I don't normally do this, and Andy, I'm not going to ask you for permission, but we have KRTV here in our channel that is kind of flaming us. So we encourage all sorts of conversations. We encourage people pushing back. And we love our conservative neighbors, our Tea Party neighbors. We love our Blue MAGA. We love our new, because we come together in this space to have that conversation. But you're being inappropriate. So for the first time ever in over a year and a half, I'm going to block you. You are no longer going to be allowed in this conversation. Please get your shit together. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Okay.
So,
Well said.
okay. So now getting back to the adult table, I really appreciate everybody joining in, and thank you so much for this conversation. And I've said it before, and for our new Friend Hampton family, you guys really make this program and the conversation so much better, because number one, you guys are smart as hell. And what I love about this is we leave our comments in for people to see after the fact. So you really add to the entire conversation, and other people who will see this next week, 2 months from now, or whenever, you guys really make it happen. So I so appreciate you joining and having this conversation with us, all that sort of thing. So thank you so much for doing that. And I hope that we become your new favorite morning show, whether you're going to work or you're coming home from work or doing your chores, that you bring us with you and continue this conversation. So I just absolutely love everything about it. You guys totally make my day, make all the bullshit that we go through worth it. So thank you. I appreciate it. Andy, words of wisdom. You want to take us out?
Yes. I was going to have 2 sets, but we're running a little bit late. So I'll just add the funny one. MMT, right? If you don't understand it, the only time you should be talking about inflation is if you're blowing up your bed. And that's all I got. Carrie, again, I must emphasize that I love what you do every show. You're just the perfect person for me to be co-hosting this show with, and I appreciate you every time we do this. To the rest of you, thank you for watching. To Fred Hampton Leftists, we are so appreciative that you value us to be part of the group. We're absolutely thrilled and looking forward to amazing things. And enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. And we will see you bright and early on Monday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G.